The conversation, the conversation will still be there even if
I
you're
like how
upside
it
down.
says continue, leave meeting.
All right, so I want to hear from each of you on what you're thinking about with your projects. I would encourage you, even if you're not interested in starting your project immediately, to delve into the Go Gold and get your proposal submitted. And I know I'm skipping ahead a couple of steps, so we'll get there. But get the proposal submitted and approved by your council, because that's the first hurdle, and that can be a big hurdle for many girls. Because depending on what happens with the proposal in council, that can take some time, and it can be a little bit draining. One of my goals with Highest Awards Chit Chat is to try and lower that wall, make it easier to get over, so that it's not so draining. But it is one of the hardest parts of the Gold Award project. And so I really encourage you, even if you're not ready to completely jump into the project, to get that preliminary piece done and get approval from your council, because then whenever the time comes up where you have the time and you have the energy and you have the contacts, you're ready to go. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yep.
All right, so I'm going to take the easy questions first. The difference between the project advisor and a mentor. And I don't know exactly, honestly, Colorado's one that I've worked with less than some other councils, so I'm not 100% sure how they work. But in general, the project advisor is somebody that the girl identifies and has joined the team, their team, in order to help them through the project. And when I talk to girls about who would make a good project advisor, I really consider what the project is. So if there is some specific knowledge that's needed, like if you're doing something that's health related or mental illness related, you really want like a provider probably involved. But I also, again, depending on what the project is, sometimes girls, so there's been quite a few girls in the last year that have started doing podcasts on whatever their subject is, right? And so maybe their project advice, maybe they have enough knowledge or they have the contacts for the podcast, but what they don't know is how to do a podcast. And so then in those cases, their project advisor may be somebody who does podcasts and can help them through that. So it can either be knowledge or skills. Once you've flushed out your project, you figure out where your weakness is, and that's where you should bring in your project advisor. Does that make sense?
Yep, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. And then the mentor is usually assigned by council, and they are somebody who's a volunteer with council or staff person at council, usually volunteers, that helps the girl go through. And I say helps because, again, it depends on how the council manages the program, but helps the girl go through the process. And most of the times those mentors are assigned when you submit your proposal. Okay. I know Atlanta assigns that, like you say, I'm interested in doing gold, and they assign a mentor at that part, even before you have started writing your proposal. And that's what my council is working towards. We're transitioning right now, and our goal is by January 1st that we have that in place, so that a girl can say, I'm interested in going gold, and then we can get them a volunteer assigned mentor right away to do things kind of like some of the things we're going to do tonight here, to help them with Go Gold, to help them flush out different pieces of their proposal, to help understand how to answer the questions, how to define your root cause when you're defining the measurability aspects for Go Gold in your proposal. What does that mean? And what kind of information needs to be in there? So that when that proposal is submitted to the review group, the project is much clearer at that point, to give that give the Girl Scouts some additional help along the way to, again, reduce that wall, make it easier, because the proposal should not be the hardest part of the
Okay.
project. And I don't think Colorado does that. I don't know if Colorado even requires somebody to say, hey, I'm interested, until they submit their proposal.
No, they don't. So the first step is online training, which we're doing. We started, and then we're going to finish up after this call. And then they are required to find their advisor and put together their proposal and submit it through Go Gold. And then once they do that, that initiates the contact with council. But then they're still doing, from what I've heard from other leaders, they're still doing an in-person proposal.
Right. So usually you submit the proposal and Go Gold, and then you have an in-person or a Zoom in-person. You know, in-person is a relative term nowadays. But you have an actual presentation or an interview or something. And that is because, well, first of all, it's a great practice interview for growth, personal growth, right?
Yeah.
But it's also because so many times when the proposals are submitted, because we aren't assigning those, the committee/volunteer mentors so early in the process, answers aren't complete in Go Gold. And so the project really isn't as clear as it could be. And so you have to have that in-person component to really understand what the project is. And oftentimes after that, the council/volunteers ask the girls to flush out. So they get their Go Gold proposal back, and they have to go back into Go Gold and add additional information based on what came through in the interview. And again, that's where, you know, I want to provide additional education and support ahead of time, so that we have really good written proposals, so that when we have that in-person conversation, that there aren't that many questions, because the written proposal is so well. Now, there are also girls that writing is an issue, right? Like, it doesn't matter how much support you have, we're probably going to have writing, but as soon as you get that in-person presentation, like verbally, that girl might be able to, like, really spew out all of her facts and figures, all of her reasons and everything else. You know, so you know, we have to recognize each individual girl's abilities at the same time.
Okay. What are some things that you would advise for them to keep in mind, maybe for a strong proposal and or strong proposal interview?
So why don't I bring up Go Gold real quick, because I need to do that in order to have the prompts.
Oh, okay.
I don't have it memorized. Let me figure out which account is the one that. I don't think it's any of these. Oh, I bet it's this one. Okay, let me screen share. Oh, I wonder if this will be
Upside down?
Upside down or not for you. Is that upside down?
No.
Right
Okay.
side up.
Good. All right. So these two are optional. Okay. So this is Cheryl talking, not GSUSA talking.
Okay.
Let's just be clear. These two are optional. These are brainstorming pieces. And we're going to talk about different pieces. So we're going to cover these in the conversation we have. What steps 1 and 2 really do, in my opinion, is help girls identify which direction to go. You know, are you more interested in doing a STEM-based project, a community-based project, an arts-based project, you know, something like that. But in my opinion, it doesn't really give girls specific direction to help them combine their passions with their interests in order to create a great project. And so I'm gonna look at these steps 3, 4, and 5 here with you guys to give you some tips and tricks, because 3, 4, and 5 are the proposal.
Okay.
And then 6 and 7 are after your proposal is approved, 6 and 7 will open up. And so that is your final report. But what I encourage girls to do is once their proposal is approved and 6 and 7 open up, that means that your timeline is opened up, your budget is opened up, and the questions are opened up for the final report. And even though you might not be writing your final report as you're going through, every time you do something related to your project, I really encourage you to go in here, either, if you're having a meeting with someone, go into the timeline and add that meeting in, put in a description of what you guys talked about. There's a who you met with and then how long that meeting took, and do that every single time. And then the same with the budget. If you go and get donations, make sure you write those donations in on your budget form right away. If you spend some money, make sure you write that expense in on your budget right away. But then in the questions, what you can do is when this opens up, look at the questions for the final report. And as different things happen during your project, make notes. It doesn't even have to be a complete sentence. Make notes in where it might be relevant. And you don't even really have to worry about it being relevant. It's more important about making the notes about something that happened, because you can move things around later on. But by making those notes on memorable experiences as you go through, it's going to help you write that final report when you get there. Because if your project takes 6 or 7 months, when you start writing that report at the end of 7 months, you're not necessarily going to remember what happened in month 2. But if you're taking notes and saying, maybe you had a meeting with someone and you put that meeting in the timeline, but they had this brilliant idea that led you in a new direction, you want to make a little bit bigger of a note on what that brilliant idea was and why it led you in that different direction, so that when you, at the end of 7 months, write that report, you remember that interaction and how it impacted your project. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. So steps 3, 4, and 5, as I said, are the proposal. And I actually, again, this is Cheryl, not GSUSA. I actually start with step 4. I skip step 3. And there's a reason for that. And I'll share as we go through. Okay. So this is building your plan. And if your council requires extra files, this is where you would fill them up and then upload those documents. Here's a description. So this, obviously, very short field, Gold Award title. So this is what you're going to call your project. And what you may want to do is not actually fill this out right away. Like, you don't have to fill any of this out in order. You just want to, when you're done, go through it all. Because you might want to really flush out your project before you create your title. But when you create your title, think social media, think Twitter posts, right? You want something that's short and meaningful that really describes what your project is. So don't call it Sue's Gold Award Project. Give it a title similar to that really describes what it is in 8 or 9 words. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Proposed start date. So know what your council's timelines are when you submit your proposal, and you should learn this during your training. They should give you some guidance in that, where, for example, they have 2 to 4 weeks after you submit your proposal to have that interview, and then they have another week before they decide if they approve it or not. I don't know what the timelines are, but something like that, right?
Right.
So when you're doing this, and you're getting ready to hit that submit button for your proposal, make sure that this proposed start date takes into account those timelines. So if we're doing this right now, you don't want that proposed start date to be October 1st. We probably want it to be November 15th or November 30th, depending on the council's timelines after you hit the submit button. Okay. And then the proposed end date will be the end, however long you think you're going to take. And there is a timeline piece in there. And so we're going to walk through the timeline piece. We're going to have a narrative through the timeline piece. And so this is another one where you probably are going to do the timeline and then come back and fill these dates in. Okay. This is a theme. Literally, you check whichever pictures it is, and all it on your proposal, it just says this is the theme and these are the 3 themes. So there's no narrative here. You just pick whatever pictures you feel relate to your project.
Okay.
Issue. Okay. So this is the first longer section answer. You get 2,000 characters. Okay. I encourage you to use at least 1,500 of those 2,000 characters, if not all 2,000. Okay.
Okay.
And the question here is, my gold award aims to address this issue. Okay. Now you'll notice the next tab is root cause. Okay. So this is not your root cause. This is the general bigger, and when I say general, I don't mean like huge, but the general bigger issue. So let's say you're doing a homeless project, right? And so then you're going to talk about whatever aspect of homelessness that you're going to try and work on, and why you've picked that, especially if there is a personal connection to the reason that you're doing it, make sure you include that in here. Whatever research you've done, if you found articles on it that support why you need to do this project or things like that, make sure to use those hyperlinks and put them in here. Refer to your research in this question. So when you think about all those different things, right, what you're doing with this question is you're trying to explain to who's ever reviewing your proposal how you came up with this, why this is important to you, and how it's an important issue in the world. Okay. That's what you should be answering in this question. Okay.
Okay.
And then here, these are shorter. I'm not quite, honestly, I don't know why they have this broken out. But then these are the shorter ones. Okay. And so maybe you have a couple of sentences in the big box that say, I had a family member whose parents lost their jobs, and so they ended up being homeless, and so I really want to help them. And you explain that in a couple of sentences in the bigger one. But then under the reasons I selected my issue, you might say, because of my personal connection with my cousin who became homeless, something shorter, more concise. And it has 2 here. If you want, you can add another. Okay, not required, but you can add more if you have it. But these are like short, concise bullets about why you're picking this project. Okay.
Okay.
So in the first section, you're really trying to connect and verbalize and really explain, and then you're summarizing in these smaller boxes. Okay, and then this is root cause. So this is, so if you guys have done a couple of journeys, you've probably discussed root cause more than a lot of troops have. But this is the actual problem that you're trying to solve, and specific problem, not general problem. So on the last one, we kind of talked about general, but this is specific. So maybe if I'm using this homelessness example, I don't know why I have homelessness in my head today, I'm sorry. But if I'm using this homelessness example, maybe there is an issue with school attendance because the student is homeless, right? And so you've identified that when a student becomes homeless, maybe in the research in the last one, you say when a student becomes homeless, they miss X number more days a year than the average student, right? And then on the last page, you would hyperlink whatever your source is. for that fact, right? And so then here you would dig into that students missing school. Here's my very, very specific thing that I'm working on, right? And again, you have 2,000 characters here. Try and use at least 1,500 to really delve into what that problem is. And then the second half of it is, oops. Why is my computer not cooperating here? And then the second half is what you're actually going to do. Okay.
Okay.
So that issue and that root cause, they're kind of symbiotic questions, but think of them more as issue is general and root cause is very specific, and that will help you when you're answering the questions. Does that help? Okay. Target audience. Again, this is short form. See, it's not 2,000. So this is another short form. So on the report, it's going to end up bulleting who your target audience is. And when you're talking about target audience, if you're going to work with a school, be specific in what age you're going to work with. Be specific if there is a sub-demographic within that age that you're going to work with. A lot of times girls give very, very generic answers in this question. And then that becomes a feedback point, because it's, well, how are you really going to touch every single person in that target audience? So I don't know if you've ever heard the phrase niche it down, but it's what niching it down means is really identifying that person that you're trying to talk to. Okay.
Okay, so instead of saying elementary age, you would say perhaps first and second graders or 7 to 9 year olds.
That would be great.
Yeah.
And
okay.
and let's say you're doing something. So quite a few girls do STEM, and they really try and help create STEM programs in schools that don't have those programs, right? And so then then your target audience may be first and second graders at John Monroe. So I'm trying to say, I said John, and then I couldn't think of anybody who had a last name. At Monroe Elementary School, and then, maybe say which is a charter school, or is a I don't know what all the terms are for different types of schools, or is a school. So I border Crawford County in Wisconsin, right? So I could maybe say the Gays Mills first and second graders who attend school in the lowest poverty county in the state of Wisconsin, right?
Okay.
Because then you're also hitting the why you're targeting that specific school. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes.
All right. And you may have more than one target audience, right? So there may be students, but then you may also, as you're doing this, be creating a curriculum in order to give to teachers so that they can continue the program. So then you would click the add another, and you would then separately add in teachers at that school, right? And if you can, especially when you're focused on a school or something very specific like that, it's really, really helpful. And again, I'm not 100% sure with Colorado because I haven't worked with them as much as some other councils, but oftentimes they really want to see community involvement. So then you could maybe also have the target audience of the community in whatever city to expand their knowledge in order to support the program or something like that. Maybe if you're trying to implement a STEM program at this poverty school, that maybe there's a corporation that could fund the program, right? So that would be a target audience also, because you're educating that corporation on the needs of the school too, right? And then there will be some crossover with team members too. Okay, so this part is audience. So anybody that you're going to talk to in order to educate about your project would be a target audience. And then the skills, knowledge, or attitudes my target audience would gain. Now, when you're filling this one in, I would recommend, because there's no way to, if you have 3 unique target audiences that may have 3 different skills, knowledge, or attitudes gained, there's no way to like say the elementary school is going to get this, the teachers are going to get this corporation is going to get this, right? So make sure when you do this that you put the skills, knowledge, or attitudes in the same order as your target audience. Does that make sense?
Okay, yes, it does.
Okay. But then, you know, depending on why you mentioned that audience, then there should be something that you're trying to share with them. And whatever this is what I want to share with them would go into the skills, knowledge, and attitudes. Okay, and then here is the narrative. Okay, so again, 2,000 characters. I encourage at least 1,500 to 2,000 use. And what you can do is, depending on how many bullets you had above. So let's pretend like we have the 3 bullets that we talked about, right? I'm going to say paragraph. Obviously, this is not a paper, so it's not going to be, you know, section. You know, do a section on the students and really verbalize what kind of information you're going to try, or what service you're going to try and provide to those students. And then talk about the teachers. And so if you're going to create a curriculum, talk about what your curriculum is, talk about what it's going to look like, talk about how it's going to be shared with the teachers so that they have access to it in the future, you know, all of those sorts of things. And then the corporation, talk about how you want them to sponsor the program. And so in order to get them to sponsor the program, you're going to explain the needs of the school and flush out what the needs of that school is. Does that make sense? And how this whole page goes together then?
Yes.
I think there's nothing on here. Okay, so my Gold Awards national and or global link is, and again, this is a 2,000 character box. What you can do here is similar to at the beginning when I talked about research, right? And I said use hyperlinks. In here, talk about how whatever this is that's going on, that you're focusing on for your project, how that same thing can either be replicated in other parts of the world, and why that's important to be replicated in other parts of the world, why it's still an issue in other parts of the world, things like that. And if you can find articles, again, use hyperlinks to support your whys in this. I know that historically, there has been a concern with reaching outside of your community and making an impact outside of your community. If you notice, this says global link. It doesn't say global change. So GSUSA is trying to just have the girls show how the connection of what you're doing really is relevant in the United States or in the world, right? Even if your specific project isn't big enough to break out of the boundaries of your community. So that's at the GSUSA level. And I'm pretty sure Colorado is one of the more flexible councils on that with the global link. There are some councils that really pushed that the girls had to have an action outside of whatever the direct community was. And I don't think Colorado is one of those councils. So I think you guys are okay there as long as you make the actual connection. Any questions on that one?
No.
Okay, so measurability. So when you add a measurement, you get these 3 questions, okay? What your audience, so think back to what we talked about on those earlier pages, right? What your audience is going to learn or gain, how you're going to measure impact, and when you're going to measure impact. And this should be data. So it shouldn't say, when I see the smiling faces of the children, or I see the children having great experiences, okay? So for example, if with the STEM program, if we were putting a STEM program in, you know, my goal is to have 20 students participate in the STEM program. And, you know, and when I'm going to measure impact is at the end of your project. So if your project is 9 months long, then that when I'm going to measure impact would be at the 9th month. On the homelessness, you know, we talked, the example I gave was that when a student is homeless, they have a higher absentee rate, right? So maybe your measurability is, in this case, it wouldn't be it would be what my audience will gain. And so what your audience is going to gain is better attendance in school, right? And how you're going to measure impact, you're going to show that, you know, figure out what your goal is. Your goal is to reduce absenteeism by 10%, right? And if you're going to use a percentage on here, make sure that those facts and figures have been documented somewhere else in your project then, right? So you can use percentage, but you just have to make sure that the bigger picture is documented somewhere. And again, when will you measure it? Usually you're going to be measuring at the end of your project. So it's sometimes maybe you measure halfway through and then you measure again at the end. You know, that's a possibility too. And so I would suggest adding at least 2. Really would be helpful if they have 3 layers of measurability. Okay. And remember, measurability is data. It needs to be something that you can actually, that somebody can really actually identify. And then here's the narrative box. Okay. Again, 2,000 characters. And so what you do in this is if for some reason, if let's say you use a survey, because lots of times girls use surveys. And so they do a survey at the beginning to get a base of what the knowledge is of whoever their audience is. And then they do a survey at the end to find out what their knowledge is then. And then they compare the two to show a change. So on those 3 questions that we just had, whatever you're trying to get the audience to learn, let me go back here. So whatever you're trying to get the audience to learn, how you're going to measure it. So you're going to measure it via survey. And when will I measure it? Oh, how will I measure? Via a survey with a goal of whatever change. And when will I measure? I'm going to do a survey at the beginning of my project and a survey at the end of my project. Does that make sense?
Yes.
But then in here, talk about the technical parts of how you're going to measure. Okay, because in those 3 questions, you don't really talk about how you're going to measure. You're talking about what you're measuring and what your goals are, but you don't talk about how you're going to measure it. One thing that I do encourage girls to do using this is format their goal as a SMART goal. Do you guys do SMART goals in school?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like do a sentence with the format of a SMART goal. And then you can expand on the explanation as to how you're going to do all of the 5 pieces of the SMART goal during your project. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Any questions on measurability then? Because I know that that can be a difficult piece.
Nope.
Sustainability. How your project is going to go on after you. Depending on your council, and this is another thing that I can't remember of some examples from Colorado, so I'm not 100% sure. Some councils don't like websites. And the reason they don't like websites is because, or social media, is because once you're done with your project, unless you continue it, it's going to go away, right? Like you can say my website's going to be there. Yeah, until the links start breaking and nobody's maintaining it. And then it's not a great website anymore, right? Like, yes, it's there, but it's not truly sustainable. However, you could make a website or social media sustainable by connecting with an organization and then transferring that website or that social media to them, and then them agreeing to maintain that website or social media. Okay. The STEM piece with the school, if we were to create a curriculum for the teachers, you're going to put something together, whether it's a binder, whether it's some electronic documents, whether it's something like that. And oftentimes what girls will do is they'll go to the school, it's not the school board, but they connect with the principal or the superintendent or whatever, whoever defines what the school curriculum is, and they get the school to agree to add it into the curriculum. Or you can create a club at school, and then the students in the club would continue it, right? With that STEM program, if you get that corporate sponsorship, well, maybe the corporation is the one that's now going to continue making sure that program is offered in the school. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, I'm just watching the time and I want to make sure we get to chat about your ideas too. Okay, this is the timeline plan. All right. So what you do here at the beginning, remember I said, think about the council timeline so that when you're adding these dates in, you're not adding dates in that are going to start happening before your proposal is approved, right? Like it doesn't have to be perfect, but we have girls that start their proposals and don't finish them for 2 months. And so these dates before they even submit their proposal have already gone past, right? So that's where that comes in. Activity description, you know, is it a meeting? Is it going to be some computer work? What is it going to be? Teammates needed. Okay. You may not know the names of who your teammates are that are going to be on there, right? During your proposal, because that is going to be part of the work that you do, is to build your team during your project. But describe who you might need then. So you want to find somebody who's good with graphics to help you with flyers, right? So this activity might be designing the flyers. Then your teammate's going to be somebody who does graphic design, right? So even if you don't have a name, you can still put people here, right?
Okay.
Resources needed, you know, telephone, computer, if there's software that might be needed, things like that. And then about how much you're going to work. Okay. When you're doing this timeline, you obviously want it to add up to 80 hours at least. What I really suggest is that you kind of outline this on paper first. And with these fields, it makes it easier to key it in. But then you can also add up your hours. And what I really encourage girls to do is start with like, what are my 10 biggest steps? And how much time is each one of these steps going to take? And if a step is going to take 10 hours, well, now do I need to break that down into 5 sub steps? And then so that I have that 10 hours broken down, so that each step is no more than like an hour or two. You may have some where, like if you are doing a day camp or something like that, and like the day camp is 6 hours, well, that's going to be a 6 hour block, right? Like that makes sense. But your general ongoing work, probably shouldn't be more than an hour or 2 chunks. Does that make sense?
Yes.
But then what I also encourage you to do, remember how I skipped step 3? After you get your timeline done, use your timeline to create your team. And we'll go back to step 3 in the team in a second, but go from this back to your team. I'll show you what I mean in a second, okay? This is expenses. So what do you think your expenses are going to be? And when you do this, it says where the funding is going to come from. And so if it's going to be donations that you're going to collect, then put donations. Many councils will want to know what your donation plan is. And so you might put donations dash, I'm going to do a bake sale fundraiser, you know, or our troop has allocated this many funds, right? One thing to remember is that in-kind donations. So if you're building something and you're going to a lumber store and they donate $100 worth of lumber to you, that should be on there both as an expense and as a donation. So for the proposal, that's easier because it's the same field. So you would put estimated $100 item, lumber, source of funding, donated by lumber company, right? But on your final report, it's 2 separate sections. So the lumber company would be in the income as a donation, and then the lumber itself would be in the expenses as an expense. Even though there was no money, it was an in-kind donation.
Okay.
And then strengths and talents. So these, again, similar to the other screen that I shared, these, you just pick ones. And what it does is it lists them and it bullets them. These are the strengths I'm going to use in order to make this project work well. And then this is how I'm going to do it. And this does not have to do with your sustainability. Again, this is just pick some pictures and it's going to list it out there. That is not what I want. So on this get help, this is where you build your team. And so this is where I said, skip this one and do the other one first. And so this is where you would add a team member. And again, it asks for a name. You may not know an actual name. So put graphic designer to be determined, right? Company organization to be determined. How the team member will help you, especially when you don't have a name, make sure, sorry, to put in a really good description so that they understand that this is someone you're going to go find, but this is the strengths and talents that you're looking for to support you. Okay.
Okay.
But I like doing this after the timeline because that way they're cohesive. Okay, project advisor. So you've gone through here, similar to what I said earlier, figure out where your biggest weakness is, right? Is it a technical thing that you want to do that you really need somebody who knows how to do that technical component? Or is it a knowledge thing where you really need somebody who has a really in-depth knowledge of whatever it is you're doing? Okay.
Yep.
I'm going to stop sharing. And I want to hear from you guys. I know that we're running out of time, but I would love to hear from each of you on what you think your project what you want your project to be and why.
So for my project, I don't have anything really. Oh, I think our mute is on.
No, I can hear you.
Oh, no. Okay, sorry about that. What? Oh, my name's Alexia.
Okay.
And for my project, I don't really have anything set in stone yet, but I was thinking about possibly doing music performances at a nursing home to help, like, I guess, build happiness and build a community in a nursing home with people I know who go to school with me who would be willing to perform and share their talent and kind of just share something that brings them joy, shares how music brings them joy and sharing that joy with people at the nursing homes.
And why is that important to you?
So I used to live with my great grandmother before she passed away, and when I would practice music for her, I remember how happy it would make her feel and how my joy would really be spread to her, and I want to share that with a lot of other people.
I love that. And that's a perfect example of what makes a great Gold Award project, because there is that truly personal component there. And what you just shared about your great grandma, that you have to make sure that that is in the why I'm choosing this issue part. Okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. My name's Ashley, and I don't have a plan yet because, yeah, some things are still being worked out. But yeah, I don't have a plan.
What do you enjoy doing?
I don't know. That's the most problem is I don't do much.
Oh.
I don't-
That's
wow.
not true. You're busy. You're busy. So Ashley is really active in her church, but her church also has a very good foundation as far as youth group and service. And she does spend a lot of time working and volunteering in her church.
So when you're volunteering at your church, is there anything there that frustrates you about volunteering at your church?
Not really, because I kind of control a lot of it. So if there's something that frustrates me, I tend to fix it pretty fast.
Okay, so if when you graduate high school, if you're doing those things, is there something that you could do for your Gold Award to put some more consistency into place for your church so that when you're gone and they don't have your skills readily available anymore, that somebody else could more easily step into that role?
I don't know. That'd be something to think about.
Okay. Do we have our third girl here?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you can see her.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's here. She's right here.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Emma Rose, and I was gonna do something that had to do with like sharks and the way people see them, and maybe show people that there's like solutions to the problem that they think sharks propose that aren't like slaughtering them, like overfishing them, that kind of stuff.
And why is that important to you?
Well, I got to go shark diving for my 16th birthday, and it really, when I was like under the water, it was kind of important because I had to have clearance from my neurologist because I have problems that would prevent me from otherwise going. And it was a really great experience to see how calm it was down there.
All
And
right.
how like it feels like they don't have any problems. And if we could see that like they don't have any problems, we could probably learn how to live together and make life easier for both sides of the issue, if that makes sense. I'm working on getting ideas out in a cohesive way.
No, I like that. I like the ideas. Some things that I'm hearing from you, to try and connect this and make it more personal. Do you have thoughts on your presentation for how you would be doing this education?
Probably like a seminar or something with my target audience. I still haven't figured that out. I'm like kind of deciding between adults and younger children, like younger impressionable children.
Okay, so the reason I asked that is because I wanted to see which direction you were kind of going with it. I love the idea. I think that you need to niche it down a little bit, which sounds like what you're still trying to work on. But one other thing that I heard when you were explaining your why is you talked about some neurological issues, and I heard you match that up to the calmness that you felt when you were under the water with the sharks. And I'm wondering if maybe that might be something to explore.
Okay.
Is connecting mental health with the sharks give you the calmness. Is there something, I'm not explaining this well. I kind of think about it similar to, you know, how some people listen to the ocean waves at night to help go to sleep, or to center during meditation to help center them, right? That maybe there's some connection there that you can make, where you could use maybe images of the sharks swimming around or things like that, and do some of this education, but add in some other component too.
Okay.
No pressure. It's just, as I was listening to you talk, I heard that connection, and I don't know if you were even aware.
Well, I was thinking of doing something like that, like showing two different pictures of sharks, and like asking a room of people, like, what does this picture make you think of? How does it make you feel? And then here's this picture, how does it make you feel? And then like compare the two results.
Mhm.
Use that for like backing research.
Right. I think that's a very interesting opportunity. So.
Well, thank you.
And I know I want to recognize that our time is almost up, and I know that you guys have more stuff to do. If you guys need more, if you want to throw out more ideas and get more feedback from me, as you're fleshing out your ideas, I'm happy to do that. If when you are drafting your proposals, if you get stuck on any of the questions, or even if you draft it and you want someone to look at it before you submit it to council, I am happy to do that. Even if it's not me, I really, really, really encourage you to, before you hit the button to submit, which sends your proposal to your troop leader and to your project advisor to sign off on before it goes to council. Before you do that, you can download a draft of the proposal, and I highly encourage you to do that and have somebody who knows nothing about your project, okay, read it. Because then what they can do is they can identify where they don't understand why you're doing something or things like that, and give you even that feedback. But again, you want somebody who you don't want it to be your parents, you don't want it to be your troop leader. You want somebody who doesn't know what your project is, because they haven't heard the conversations as you're brainstorming and doing these other things. And so they know nothing about it. And then they can give you cleaner feedback.
Right.
Okay.
Questions?
I have a question as to this like sustainability part, I guess, for a project. So I was just curious, like in my own project, do you have any ideas about how I could make my program more sustainable? Like after I'm no longer performing, is there a way I could make that program still intact?
So I heard you, when you were describing it, talk about involving some of your friends and things like that. And it doesn't have to be through your school. Sometimes it's easier to do it through your school, but it doesn't have to be through your school. But is there a way to maybe create a community group or a school group that what you would do with your project is get it set up and identify the contact people and identify the schedule and identify, these are, every time we're going to do a performance, these are the things that we need to make sure are covered. All of those sorts of administrative type things, and you get it organized. And then the second step is creating a group, right? And then create some sort of group. Say, hey, I have this. Here's a group. You work with them for a year. You identify your person that's going to step up, right? And get it to become an official group, right? Of, when I say official, like somewhat structured, not
Right. Yeah.
right. And then, because you've done all of the administrative thing and documented all the administrative things, it makes it easier for that group to continue because they just need to bring in fresh blood as people rotate off to bring new
Right.
people in to rotate in.
Yeah.
And then that builds in that sustainability component.
Awesome, thank you.
Mhm. Other questions?
No. No. Okay.
All right. Ashley, so it doesn't sound like the same direction that you might want to head, but my last episode for my podcast, and do you guys know I have a podcast on YouTube?
We didn't know that, no.
Oh,
That's awesome.
I thought that's how you found me.
I can't wait to listen.
Right. I'm a podcaster and I have a passion for the Gold Award Project, if you haven't figured that out after the last hour. And so 3 years ago, I created a podcast called Hearts of Gold, and I interview girls from all over the country about their Gold Award projects. And we record it, so it's also on YouTube. And my YouTube is Cheryl M. Robinson, and it's Cheryl with an S. But it's called Hearts of Gold, so you should be able to find it. But my latest episode, I interviewed somebody who, with her church, worked on getting rid of all of the plastics that they use for all of their community meals and making it sustainable in that way. Again, not related probably to what your interests are, but she took something that you hear about all the time and niched it down for her church. And so it might be interesting for you to listen to for that aspect, how she applied it within her church.
Will do.
Okay, that sounds really interesting. Thank you.
So any other questions?
I don't think the girls have any other questions right now. I don't, other than, are you sure that you're available for looking at draft proposals?
Absolutely. I truly have a passion. Any girl that wants to earn the Gold Award, I want to do everything I can to support that process.
Okay.
That's awesome. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
that's
Thank
very
you.
helpful. Thank you.
All right. And you know how to get a hold of me, right?
Yes.
Yep.
All right. All right. Well, it was great meeting you. I'm looking forward to seeing all of your proposals and your projects, and then seeing you guys become Gold Award Girl Scouts.
Awesome,
Good
thank
meeting you
you.
too.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.